They said the Blackwood Mountains held no secrets, only the ancient, unyielding rhythm of life and death, a truth as stark and cold as the winter rock. Yet some truths, it seemed, could burrow deeper than any frost, waiting for an unexpected hand to unearth them. Far from the murmuring gossip and the faint glow of streetlights in Silver Pine Hollow, a man named Elias had long found his sanctuary. His home, a sturdy cabin built with his own calloused hands, was not merely a shelter, but an extension of the rugged landscape itself. Here, in the deep folds of the wilderness, he lived a life unburdened by the complexities of the world beyond the tree line. His days a meticulous dance with nature's demands. Elias, a man whose face was a roadmap of sun and wind, wore the 70-odd years of his existence with a quiet dignity. His wild mane of white hair and a matching beard framed eyes of an unnervingly clear blue. Eyes that held the sharp intensity of a predator and the deep knowing of an ancient soul. His lean frame, though aged, still possessed a wiry strength, honed by decades of felling timber, trapping, and navigating treacherous terrain. He moved with an economy of motion, each step deliberate, each glance purposeful. His clothing, faded flannel, patched canvas trousers, a heavy, worn leather coat, spoke of utility and endurance, garments mended and cared for until they became a second skin. His hands, gnarled and scarred, were instruments of survival, capable of both delicate craftsmanship and brute force. His only constant companion, Kyle, was not merely a pet, but a shadow, a silent partner in the wilderness ballet. Kyle, a magnificent timber wolf in his prime, with a coat a striking blend of charcoal grays, rich browns, and creamy whites, moved with a fluid, silent grace that belied his powerful, muscular frame. His amber eyes, intelligent and ever alert, missed nothing, his ears perpetually perked, twitching to the slightest rustle of leaves or distant crack of ice. Kyle's loyalty to Elias was an unspoken covenant, a bond forged in shared solitude and mutual respect, a fierce devotion as palpable as the winter winds that swept through the valleys. Their existence was a testament to symbiosis, a quiet, profound understanding that transcended words, far from the judgments and the fleeting concerns of Silver Pine Hollow. They were two souls, one human and one wild, perfectly attuned to the pulse of the Blackwood Mountains. But even in the deepest wilderness, the intrusions of the outside world could shatter the fragile peace. A blizzard, fierce and relentless, descended upon the treacherous mountain passes, blanketing everything in a thick shroud of white. The wind howled like a mournful spirit, whipping snow into blinding eddies, making the world a canvas of gray and white. It was into this maelstrom that Officer Lena Petrova, a tenacious young policewoman, had ventured. She was 32, her hazel eyes, usually sharp with focus, now narrowed against the driving snow. Her athletic build, honed by training and duty, was encased in a uniform that offered little comfort against the biting cold. Lena was not on a routine patrol. This was a high-stakes, off-the-books pursuit, a path she had chosen out of a burning sense of justice. She was closing in on a lead regarding illegal logging and suspected corruption, a web of deceit that seemed to reach into the very heart of the community she served. Whispers of powerful local figures, of a network operating in the shadows, had driven her deeper into the mountains than protocol allowed. She knew the risks, the subtle threats, the deliberate misdirections that had plagued her investigation for weeks. The icy road, barely visible beneath the fresh snow, offered little traction. Her patrol car, a Ford Explorer, felt like a feather against the invisible forces of the storm. One moment, the hum of the engine, the frantic swipe of the wipers. The next, a sickening lurch, a terrifying skid on an unseen patch of black ice. The world spun, a blur of white and metal, before her vehicle plummeted down a steep ravine. The crash was brutal, a symphony of rending steel and shattering glass. The impact threw her against the restraints, then forward, a searing pain blossoming in her chest and leg. When the wreckage finally settled, mangled and twisted at the bottom of the ravine, a heavy silence descended, broken only by the shriek of the wind. Injured and disoriented, her radio shattered, its pieces scattered like teeth across the pristine snow. Lena lay alone. Her life, once so vibrant and purposeful, now seemed to ebb away with each shallow, ragged breath. The crimson stains spreading across the white uniform, a stark contrast to the pure, indifferent snow. The cold, a relentless adversary, began to creep into her bones, threatening to pull her into an endless, dreamless sleep. Elias and Kyle, accustomed to braving the harshest weather, were on their usual rounds, checking their trap lines deeper in the wilderness. The blizzard had made their task more arduous, but the rhythm of it was familiar, a comfort in its predictability. Elias moved with his characteristic slow, steady pace, his eyes scanning the snow for tracks, for signs, for anything out of place. Kyle, however, was a creature of heightened senses, his connection to the world around him far more profound than any man's. Suddenly, his ears perked up, swiveling, catching a scent alien to the wilderness. Metal, blood, and a distinct tang of fear that cut through the crisp, clean air. It was a smell of distress, of something profoundly wrong, a discordant note in the mountain symphony. Kyle let out a low, guttural growl, a sound that Elias understood implicitly. The wolf turned, not towards their usual path, but deeper into an unexplored thicket, his tail held low, his movements cautious but resolute. Elias, trusting his companion implicitly, followed, his hand instinctively going to the hunting knife at his belt. The snow, nearly waist-deep in places, made progress slow and exhausting, each step a battle against the elements. Keffel led him through a dense stand of firs, their branches heavy with snow, until the forest opened onto the edge of a steep drop. Below, partially obscured by fresh drifts, lay the mangled wreckage of a vehicle, a dark, grotesque scar on the otherwise immaculate landscape. Elias felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. The smell of gasoline and something metallic was now undeniable. Keffel, silent as a ghost, padded down the incline, his amber eyes fixed on the twisted metal. Elias followed, his aged body surprisingly agile, his mind already assessing the scene. Near the vehicle, a figure lay half buried in the snow, a stark contrast of dark fabric and crimson against the blinding white. It was a woman, barely conscious, her police uniform torn, her face pale and streaked with dirt and blood. Officer Lena Petrova. Despite his advanced age and the brutal conditions, Elias's years of wilderness survival kicked in, an instinct older and more potent than any training. He knelt beside her, his gnarled fingers, surprisingly gentle, probing for injuries. Her leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, her breathing shallow, her pulse a weak flutter beneath his touch. He noted the deep laceration on her forehead, the dark bruising on her chest. Without a word, he began to work, applying rudimentary but effective first aid, using strips of cloth torn from his own shirt to staunch the bleeding, fashioning a makeshift splint for her leg from a fallen branch and his belt. Kale stood guard, a silent, imposing sentinel against any other dangers of the forest, scavengers, the encroaching cold, the very indifference of the wild. His presence, a steady, watchful force, was a comfort in the overwhelming desolation. Elias knew he couldn't leave her. She needed medical attention far beyond his capabilities, beyond anything the wilderness could provide. The nearest settlement, Silver Pine Hollow, was days away in this weather, a perilous journey. He looked at the young woman, so fragile against the raw power of the mountain, and a deep-seated sense of responsibility, a primal duty, stirred within him. No one could have foreseen that this solitary act of kindness, this raw instinct to save, was not merely an accident of fate, nor a simple twist of circumstance. This encounter was not a mere stroke of blind luck, nor an isolated incident lost to the wild, indifferent expanse of the mountains. With grim determination, Elias knew there was no other choice. Leaving Lena to the elements was unthinkable, a betrayal of the unwritten law of the wild that demanded aid for the fallen. He surveyed the wreckage, his keen eyes already seeking solutions. The shattered remains of the patrol car yielded little, but nearby, a fallen birch, split by the storm, offered sturdy saplings. With his trusty axe, he quickly harvested several, lashing them together with strips of leather from his own pack and Lena's discarded uniform fabric, forming a rudimentary but strong sled. It was crude, heavy, but it would serve. Carefully, meticulously, he maneuvered Lena onto the makeshift platform. Her moans were faint, her skin alarmingly pale against the blood-stained fabric of her uniform. He wrapped her in his own thick wool blanket, then added his spare fur-lined coat, hoping to stave off the creeping hypothermia. Every movement sent a fresh wave of pain through her, but she remained mostly unconscious, a mercy in its own way. Cale, meanwhile, had positioned himself at the head of the sled, his powerful muzzle occasionally nudging Elias's hand, a silent communication of readiness. The journey began, an arduous, agonizing crawl through the unforgiving terrain. Elias, leaning into the improvised harness he'd fashioned from rope and more leather, strained against the weight of the sled and the deepening snow. His lungs burned with each frigid breath, his muscles screamed in protest, but a stubborn, unyielding resolve fueled him. Cale, a silent, powerful presence, led the way, his keen nose detecting the faint trails beneath the snow, guiding Elias around hidden drifts and treacherous ice patches. The wolf's body language was a constant reassurance, his watchful eyes frequently flicking back to Elias, then to the precious cargo on the sled. Days blurred into a timeless struggle against the elements. The blizzard, though it eventually lessened its fury, left behind a landscape of unbroken white, a vast, indifferent expanse that seemed determined to swallow them whole. Elias rationed his meager supplies of dried meat and jerky, forcing small sips of melted snow into Lena's parched lips whenever she stirred. He talked to her, softly, reassuringly, though he knew she couldn't understand, his voice a low rumble against the howl of the wind. He spoke of the mountains, of Cale, of the promise of warmth and safety, weaving a fragile tapestry of hope in the heart of the desolate wilderness. At night, he would dig a shallow snow cave, huddling with Cale and Lena, sharing their combined body heat. The wolf, ever vigilant, would lie closest to Lena, his warm fur a shield against the biting cold, his low growl a constant deterrent to any curious forest creatures. Elias rarely slept, his mind consumed by the relentless march forward, the fragile life he carried, the impossible distance yet to cover. His own body, though hardened by years of exposure, was nearing its breaking point. His lips were cracked and bleeding, his face gaunt, his eyes hollowed by exhaustion, yet the fire of determination never dimmed. He thought of his own youth, of hardships faced and overcome, drawing on a deep well of resilience he hadn't known he still possessed. The wilderness, usually a source of comfort and sustenance, now felt like a formidable adversary, testing his every limit. The silence was profound, broken only by the crunch of snow underfoot, the labored rasp of his breath, and the occasional mournful cry of a distant owl. It was a silence that could drive a man mad, but Elias found a strange solace in it, a clarity that stripped away all but the most essential truths: survival and the unwavering commitment to another's life. He knew the risks, the possibility of succumbing to the cold, of losing Lena, of simply vanishing into the vast white expanse. But the thought of failure never truly took root. He had made a promise, unspoken but deeply felt, to this stranger. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a faint, almost imperceptible shift in the air signaled their approach to civilization. The scent of wood smoke, distant and ethereal, reached Kael's sensitive nose first, causing him to lift his head, his ears swiveling. Elias, his senses dulled by exhaustion, barely registered it, until a faint, almost ghost-like shimmer of distant lights pierced the swirling snow. Silver Pine Hollow. The sight, a beacon of human life, brought a fresh surge of adrenaline, pushing him through the last agonizing miles. Days later, a spectral figure emerged from the blizzard into the outskirts of Silver Pine Hollow. Elias, a wraith of a man, gaunt and utterly exhausted, stumbled forward, pulling the makeshift sled. On it lay the unconscious policewoman, Lena, her face still pale, her breathing shallow but steady. Padding silently beside him, a magnificent, snow-dusted timber wolf, Kyle, his amber eyes scanning the bewildered faces that now appeared. The sight caused an immediate uproar. Children playing in the fresh snow froze, their laughter dying in their throats. Adults shoveling driveways or hurrying about their morning routines stopped dead, their expressions a mixture of shock, fear, and disbelief. A wild man, a wolf, and a seemingly dead policewoman? It was a scene ripped from a nightmare or perhaps an ancient legend. Whispers, then shouts, erupted, drawing more people from their homes. Sheriff Brody, a man of rigid rules and a deep-seated distrust for anything that deviated from the norm, was among the first to arrive. His face, usually set in a no-nonsense expression, was now a mask of incredulity. Brody, a man of 52, with a slightly stocky build and neatly trimmed graying brown hair, had seen his share of oddities in Silver Pine Hollow, but nothing like this. He eyed the reclusive Elias and his wild companion with deep suspicion. He knew of Elias, of course, the old hermit of the Black Wood, a local legend, mostly harmless, but certainly not someone to be trusted implicitly. And a wolf? An actual wild wolf walking calmly beside a human? It defied all logic, all order. "Hold it right there," Brody barked, his hand instinctively going to his sidearm, though he didn't draw it. His voice, usually firm and authoritative, held an edge of uncertainty. "Who are you? What in God's name is going on?" Elias, too exhausted to offer a coherent explanation, merely gestured weakly towards Lena on the sled. His blue eyes, though sunken, held a desperate plea. Kyle let out a low, warning growl, his hackles rising slightly as several townsfolk began to approach, their curiosity overriding their fear. Brody, seeing the wolf's reaction, held up a hand to the approaching crowd, his gaze still fixed on Elias. "It's Officer Petrova," someone from the crowd gasped, recognizing the uniform despite its state. The realization sent a fresh wave of murmurs through the onlookers. Medics, called by a frantic bystander, arrived moments later, their ambulance siren wailing briefly before being cut off. They rushed to Lena's aid, their movements efficient and professional, carefully transferring her from the makeshift sled to a stretcher. Brody watched, his mind racing, trying to reconcile the impossible tableau before him. He had dismissed Lena's disappearance as a likely accident, a young officer pushing too hard in treacherous conditions. But this was something else entirely. He gave Elias a long, hard look, then nodded to his deputies. "Get him inside, and keep that wolf contained, but don't provoke it." Elias, too spent to resist, allowed himself to be led away, Cal following protectively, a silent guardian. The old man was given hot food, water, and a warm place by the fire, but his words were few, his explanations terse. He had found her. She was hurt. He brought her here. That was all. His focus remained on Lena, his eyes constantly darting towards the clinic where she had been taken. As Lena slowly recovered in the town's small clinic, her initial days were a blur of pain, medication, and fragmented nightmares of the crash. Her fractured leg was set, her concussion carefully monitored, and the deep lacerations cleaned and stitched. Dr. Eleanor Vance, the town's no-nonsense physician, assured Sheriff Brody that Lena was lucky to be alive, a testament to Elias's swift, if crude, first aid. When Lena finally regained full consciousness, her voice raspy, her body aching, she confirmed Elias and Cal's heroic rescue, silencing the whispers of doubt and suspicion that had begun to circulate about the old recluse. "He saved my life," she whispered, her eyes, though still clouded with pain, holding a fierce gratitude. And the wolf, he was always there. This simple, heartfelt account began to shift the town's perception of Elias, transforming him from an eccentric hermit into a quiet hero. However, as her mind cleared, her fragmented memories of the pursuit began to coalesce, raising more questions than answers. She spoke of powerful local figures, names that Brody knew well, men who held sway in Silver Pine Hollow's economy and politics. She recalled a corrupt network involved in illegal logging operations, specifically mentioning a remote tract of protected forest known as the Whispering Pines. Her investigation, she recounted, had been deliberately steered into dangerous territory. Her radio, she remembered, had gone dead almost immediately after she reported her location, an unusual and unsettling silence that had left her isolated and vulnerable. She recalled specific coordinates she had been given, a route that had taken her far off the standard patrol grid, deep into the most treacherous part of the Blackwood Mountains. "It felt wrong," she rasped, her brow furrowing in concentration. "Like I was being led somewhere specific, not just chasing a lead." She even remembered a brief, fleeting glimpse of another vehicle, not a logging truck, but a dark, unmarked SUV, just before her car skidded. It had been too far to identify, but the memory gnawed at her. Sheriff Brody, initially focused on the improbable story of Elias and his wolf, found himself increasingly pulled into Lena's narrative. He was a man who valued order and procedure, and Lena's claims, while disturbing, were delivered with a conviction that resonated with his own professional instincts. He began to investigate her claims, starting with the mundane but critical details. He pulled the official records of her patrol, comparing them to her fragmented recollections. Immediately, inconsistencies began to surface. The dispatch log showed her assigned to a different sector that night, a routine patrol closer to town. Yet, her last recorded communication, before the radio silence, placed her precisely where she said she was, deep in the Whispering Pines area. The official report listed her crash as a single-vehicle accident due to icy conditions, a conclusion that now felt too neat, too convenient. Brody started digging deeper, interviewing the dispatchers who were on duty that night. Their accounts were hesitant, contradictory. One dispatcher, a young woman named Sarah, seemed particularly nervous, avoiding eye contact, mumbling about technical glitches and orders from above to reroute Lena. Brody's antenna, finely tuned to the subtle tremors of small-town secrets, began to twitch. He checked the maintenance logs for Lena's patrol car, specifically its radio. No malfunctions reported. He cross-referenced the coordinates Lena mentioned with known logging routes, and, more tellingly, with areas where illegal timber operations had been suspected for years but never proven. The Whispering Pines, a protected ecological zone, was a hotbed for such rumors. The more he dug, the clearer it became. Lena wasn't just on a routine patrol, she was targeted. Her crash wasn't a simple accident. Brody felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He knew the names Lena had whispered. Silas Thorne, the owner of Thorne Timber, a powerful figure in Silver Pine Hollow, whose family had been rooted in the town for generations. And Mayor Wallace, a man known for his smooth talk and even smoother dealings. These were men who wielded significant influence, men who could make problems disappear. He began to feel a subtle pressure, phone calls from Thorne's lawyer, casual inquiries from Mayor Wallace about the progress of Lena's recovery, all laced with an unspoken warning. Brody, a man who had always prided himself on his independence, found himself navigating a treacherous landscape of local politics and veiled threats. He realized he was no longer just investigating a traffic accident. He was uncovering a carefully orchestrated plot. The truth, like a persistent wolf, was beginning to gnaw at the edges of Silver Pine Hollow's carefully constructed piece. The truth, when it finally surfaced, hit Silver Pine Hollow like an avalanche, burying the town's placid veneer under a mountain of scandal and betrayal. Brody's relentless investigation, conducted largely under the radar of the very people he suspected, eventually unearthed a crucial piece of evidence. A junior deputy, intimidated by Brody's unwavering gaze and Lena's harrowing story, finally broke. Deputy Miller, a young man with a conscience still intact, confessed to receiving an anonymous, untraceable burner phone call that night, instructing him to deliberately jam Lena's police radio frequency and to subtly alter the dispatch records, sending her on a wild goose chase deep into the Whispering Pines. The call had come from a voice he recognized, a voice he was terrified to name, but which Brody had already suspected: Silas Thorne, the logging magnate. Thorne, along with Mayor Wallace and a few other prominent citizens, and even some elements within the town's own leadership and law enforcement, had formed a powerful local syndicate. Their illegal activities were extensive: systematic clear-cutting of protected old-growth timber in the Whispering Pines, using the proceeds to fund a lucrative drug distribution network that stretched far beyond Silver Pine Hollow, and even engaging in land fraud, coercing struggling landowners to sell their properties at rock-bottom prices. Lena's investigation had gotten too close, her tenacity a genuine threat to their meticulously built empire. Her pursuit had been a setup, a calculated murder attempt disguised as a tragic accident. The icy patch, the ravine, the jammed radio, all were part of a chillingly precise plan to ensure she would disappear without a trace, her death attributed to the dangers of mountain policing. Elias and Kyl's rescue had inadvertently foiled this calculated execution. The news spread like wildfire, reaching state authorities through Brody's discreet channels. He had bypassed local political structures, fearing further compromise, and contacted the state police and the Attorney General's office directly, presenting them with an irrefutable dossier of evidence. A full-scale investigation was immediately launched, spearheaded by a special task force. The once sleepy town was gripped by scandal, its veneer of tranquility shattered by the exposed treachery. Arrests followed swiftly, beginning with Silas Thorne and Mayor Wallace, their smug confidence replaced by pale fear as handcuffs clicked shut. Several other prominent citizens, including the chief of the local planning commission and 2 more deputies, were also implicated and taken into custody. The revelations sent shockwaves through the community, tearing apart long-held assumptions about their leaders and neighbors. Trust, once a bedrock of Silver Pine Hollow, crumbled into dust. In the wake of the scandal, Elias, once an outcast, a figure of whispered legends and cautious avoidance, was hailed as a quiet hero. The town, forced to confront its own hidden darkness, now looked upon him with a newfound respect, even reverence. His deep connection to the wilderness, once seen as an eccentricity, was now understood as a profound integrity, a moral compass uncorrupted by the machinations of human society. He hadn't sought recognition, but it found him nonetheless. Kyl, his loyal wolf, became a symbol of unexpected salvation, a majestic creature whose wildness had brought justice to a corrupt world. Children, once wary, now pointed him out with awe, and even the most cynical adults acknowledged the extraordinary bond between man and beast. Lena, against all odds, made a full recovery, though the physical and emotional scars of her ordeal would forever remain. Her resolve to fight corruption, however, was stronger than ever. She became a beacon of justice, her story inspiring not only her fellow officers, but also the citizens of Silver Pine Hollow to demand greater transparency and accountability from their leaders. She testified bravely, her voice clear and unwavering, against the powerful syndicate, ensuring that their crimes would not go unpunished. She chose to remain in Silver Pine Hollow, dedicating herself to rebuilding trust within the police force and the community, becoming a symbol of hope and renewed integrity. The events forever changed Silver Pine Hollow. The town, forced to confront its hidden darkness, began a slow, painful process of healing and rebuilding trust. Town meetings, once placid affairs, became forums for passionate debate and calls for reform. New leadership, chosen for their honesty and commitment to public service, began the arduous task of restoring faith in local government. The illegal logging operations ceased, and efforts were made to rehabilitate the scarred Whispering Pines. The drug network was dismantled, its tentacles severed. Elias and Kael, their part played, eventually returned to their mountain sanctuary. The quiet solitude they cherished was now tinged with a new layer of respect, a bridge built between their wild world and the human one. Occasionally, a townsperson, emboldened by the truth, would leave a small offering of food or supplies at the edge of the forest, a silent gesture of gratitude and understanding. Their story, a testament to courage, loyalty, and the relentless pursuit of truth, echoed through the valleys, a legend born from the heart of the wilderness, a reminder that even in the deepest shadows, light can emerge from the most unexpected sources. Silver Pine Hollow, once a town oblivious to its own rot, had been stripped bare. But in its raw vulnerability, it found the strength to rebuild, to truly become the community it always aspired to be.